The phone rang at 2 a.m., the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. I groggily picked it up, still half dreaming, only to hear Maria's voice on the other end, shaky and frantic. "I need you. Please. You've got to help me." Her words were barely understandable, but the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. I rubbed my eyes, trying to wake up, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Maria, what's wrong? What's going on?" I sat up, my heart starting to race despite the confusion still clouding my mind. I don't know how to say this, but I think someone's coming after me. I need money. Fast." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I could hear the fear. It wasn't like Maria to sound so shaken, but it was late, and we'd been through too much together for me not to believe her. "What do you mean someone's coming after you? Why? What's going on?" I threw the covers off, swinging my legs to the floor, not even bothering to check the time. My concern for her was the only thing that mattered now. I've been messing around with something I shouldn't have. Something dangerous. I should have never got involved in the first place, but I did. And now, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I've got no way out, and I just need help. Please, can you do this for me? Her breath came in ragged gasps, and I could tell she was close to tears. I didn't hesitate. Of course, I was going to help her. She was my best friend. I'd known her for years, and we had survived everything together, every breakup, every job loss, every bad decision. This was no different. "How much do you need?" "I'll send it over now. Just tell me what happened. I'll help you figure it out." She paused for a moment, almost too long, and when she spoke again, it was different. Cold. "It's a lot more than I can explain over the phone. Just send the money. You'll understand everything soon." I didn't think twice. I had some savings, and my bank account was more than enough to cover whatever she needed. I'd always been there for Maria, no questions asked. So I transferred the money, $10,000, just like she asked, hoping that would be enough to make whatever crisis she was in go away. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly know, was that sending her that money would be the beginning of the end for everything I thought I knew about our friendship. The next day, everything changed. Maria's boutique had been doing well for months, a little startup that turned into something bigger than either of us had expected. I had been her first investor, her biggest supporter. When I helped her get off the ground, it felt like a success story we could both be proud of. But now, the distance between us seemed to stretch further by the hour. I tried calling her after sending the money, just to check in, to see if she was okay, but every call went straight to voicemail. Every message I left was ignored. I figured she was probably busy dealing with whatever mess she had gotten herself into. But that feeling, the one gnawing at me in the pit of my stomach, didn't go away. A few days later, I walked into her boutique, hoping to find some answers. It was the middle of the afternoon, and the store was bustling with customers. But as soon as I stepped in, I saw Maria behind the counter. She didn't look at me, not even for a second. She was absorbed in a conversation with another customer, barely acknowledging my presence. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Something felt off, something I couldn't quite place. But I needed to know what was going on, needed to make sense of everything that had been happening. So I walked up to her. "Hey, Maria, can we talk?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though the tension was building in my chest. She glanced up, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But it was gone before she spoke. "Not right now. I'm busy. Can't you see that?" Her tone was sharp, dismissive. It stung. "Busy? Maria, you've been ignoring me for days. What's going on? What did you get yourself into?" My voice cracked with frustration, and I could feel the wall she'd put up between us growing higher. "I told you. I'm fine," she snapped, turning away to help the customer in front of her. "I don't need you to worry about me anymore. I can handle it." That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a business thing. This wasn't about money or some fleeting problem that would go away with time. Maria wasn't just pulling away from me, she was cutting me out entirely. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Every word she said, every cold glance she threw my way, felt like a betrayal. I thought I knew her better than anyone, but now, I didn't even recognize the person standing in front of me. The person I had poured my time, money, and trust into. I stood there for a moment longer, not knowing what to say, before I turned and walked out of the boutique. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the reality of what was happening hit me full force. Maria was pulling away from me. Not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, and in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. The worst part? She hadn't even told me why. It wasn't just the silence that bothered me. It was the way everything seemed to change overnight. Maria wasn't responding to my calls or texts, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how she began treating me like a stranger. I tried to keep my distance at first, telling myself it was just a phase, that she was going through something personal. But days turned into weeks, and every time I tried reaching out, she shut me down harder. She was cold, distant. It felt like I was fighting a battle, and no matter how much I pushed, I couldn't break through. After a week of nothing, I decided to show up at her place unannounced. I had to do something. I needed answers. The weight of the unanswered questions was suffocating. I hadn't even seen her face in days, not since the last time I stepped into the boutique. I thought that maybe, if I confronted her in person, things would finally make sense. Maybe then she'd explain why everything felt like it was crumbling between us. So, I stood in front of her apartment door, hesitant, unsure whether this was the right move. But I wasn't backing down. I knocked, hard. The silence on the other side was deafening, and I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my chest as I waited. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I heard the sound of the locks clicking, followed by the door creaking open. Maria stood there, but she didn't look at me. She just stared at the ground, not even bothering to acknowledge my presence. I felt a surge of frustration building inside me, but I pushed it down, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maria, we need to talk." My words were calm, but I could feel the anger brewing just beneath the surface. She didn't respond at first. She just kept staring down at the floor, as if she were trying to avoid looking at me altogether. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, but her voice was sharp. "I'm not in the mood for this right now. You should go." "Not in the mood? Are you serious?" My tone was rising, but I was too far gone to care anymore. "You've been avoiding me for days, Maria. Weeks. I deserve an explanation. I'm the one who gave you everything you needed to get this business started. I'm the one who helped you, and now you treat me like I'm invisible." She stepped back, letting the door swing open just enough for me to see her fully. The apartment was dark, and the air was thick with tension. "I didn't ask for your help. You just gave it, without even thinking. And now, you expect me to do what?" "Thank you for saving me." Her words were venomous, dripping with bitterness. "Is that what you think this is? That I'm some charity case for you to rescue?" I was taken aback by the force of her words. I had never seen her like this before. "I've been your friend for years. I didn't give you that money because I wanted something in return. I did it because I believed in you. Because I wanted to see you succeed. I thought that's what friends do for each other." Maria finally met my eyes, and the coldness in her gaze made my stomach drop. "Friends? What do you know about being a friend?" She shot back, her voice trembling with anger. "You think you're the only one who's had to sacrifice for this? I've worked my ass off to make this business work, and you don't get to take credit for everything just because you gave me some cash. I never asked you for anything but space, but you couldn't even give me that." I felt the words hit me like a slap, each one landing harder than the last. "Space? You think you're the only one who's been giving things up? I put my life on hold for you, Maria. I've been there every step of the way, and now you act like I'm the problem." My voice was breaking now, the hurt coming through louder than I could have imagined. "I thought you were my best friend. But now you're turning everything upside down, and I don't even recognize you anymore." She stood there in silence, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, like she was protecting herself from my words. "Maybe you should have recognized it sooner," she said, almost quietly. "Maybe you should have realized that I didn't need you as much as you thought I did." I was stunned. "What does that even mean, Maria? After everything we've been through, you're telling me you didn't need me?" My mind was racing, trying to piece together the person standing in front of me. "You've changed. I don't even know who you are anymore." "I'm not the same person I was when I started this business," she said, her voice hardening again. "And I'm tired of pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I'm done with all of this. Done with you. Done with being your charity project. I've got bigger things to focus on." Something about the way she said it, the finality in her voice, made my heart sink. She had cut me off without a second thought, without hesitation. This wasn't just about money. This was something deeper, something that went beyond the betrayal of a friend. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she had turned on me, or that she had the audacity to act like it was all my fault. "Maria, this isn't over," I said, my voice low and filled with a quiet anger I couldn't contain anymore. "I don't care what you think, but I'm not just going to walk away from you. You're going to have to face this." She didn't respond. She just turned away from me, walked back into the apartment, and slammed the door shut in my face. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door. The weight of her words, her coldness, Everything that had happened in the past few weeks, it all hit me then. I had been used. I had been blind to it, but now it was clear. Maria didn't want me in her life anymore. And worse, she didn't want me anywhere near her success. As I walked away from her apartment, I realized that this wasn't just a friendship unraveling. This was something darker, something I hadn't even begun to understand. The questions were piling up, and I had no answers. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. And the more I wanted to know, what exactly was she hiding from me? I spent the next few days replaying everything over and over in my head. Each conversation, every time Maria's face had shifted from warmth to something cold and distant, I couldn't make sense of it. What had happened to us? What had happened to her? I couldn't get the image of her shutting the door in my face out of my mind. The finality of it, the way she had made it clear she didn't want me involved anymore, it gnawed at me. But no matter how many times I tried to make sense of it, nothing felt right. I was missing something, and I couldn't let it go. One evening, I decided to go through some of the old messages we had exchanged. I dug through our history, desperate to find a clue, something to make it click. That's when I stumbled upon it, an odd message from about a month ago, buried in our texts. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, but looking at it now, it stood out. Maria had written something about taking care of everything and getting rid of the last piece. It didn't make sense. What did she mean by that? What was she talking about? My stomach churned as I stared at the message. It wasn't like Maria to talk in code or to make cryptic remarks. I was convinced something was wrong, that there was more to this whole situation than just a falling out between friends. I couldn't let it go. I had to know. The next morning, I went to the boutique again. It had been nearly 2 weeks since I'd set foot in there, but I needed to confront her again. I knew she would probably shut me out, but I couldn't just keep walking away. I needed answers. I had no idea what had happened to the person I had once trusted more than anyone, but I wasn't going to let her just disappear from my life without figuring out why. When I walked in, she was behind the counter, as usual, helping a couple of customers. She looked up for a moment when I entered, but when our eyes met, she quickly looked away. It was like I wasn't even there. She didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't say anything. I wasn't surprised. I had expected this, but I wasn't leaving without talking to her. I walked up to the counter, standing there for a moment, watching her interact with the customers. She was calm, collected, professional, but the coldness in her eyes was unmistakable. It was like she was a completely different person, and I couldn't even begin to understand why. Finally, when the customers left, I leaned in and said, "Maria, we need to talk." Now. She didn't look at me. She just kept arranging things on the counter, her movements slow and deliberate. "I've already told you. I don't have anything to say to you. You should leave." I ignored her words. "No, I'm not leaving until you tell me what's really going on. What's with all the secrecy? What are you hiding from me?" My voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. I wasn't going to back down. She paused, her fingers stopping mid-motion as she glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Hiding? You think I'm hiding something from you?" Her voice was almost mocking, but there was something in her eyes that shifted. Something I hadn't seen before. It was subtle, but it was their fear. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I wasn't about to let her push me away again. "I don't know what's going on, Maria, but I'm not leaving here until you tell me. I want the truth. What's going on with you? What's happening with your business?" She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes flickering with something, anger, guilt, something else. But then, without a word, she stepped out from behind the counter. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Follow me." She led me into the back of the store, to a small office space that I had never seen before. It was cluttered with papers, receipts, and boxes of inventory. The light was dim, and the air felt thick with tension. I followed her inside, watching her closely. Whatever was about to happen, I knew it wasn't going to be good. Maria stood by the desk, her back turned to me, her hands clenched tightly by her sides. "You want the truth," she said quietly. "Here it is. I've been involved in things I shouldn't have. I made a deal with some people I shouldn't have gotten involved with. And now I'm stuck." I froze. "What do you mean, stuck? What are you talking about?" She took a deep breath before turning to face me, her eyes finally meeting mine. "The money you gave me, it wasn't just for the boutique. I used it for something else. I got involved with some people, dangerous people. I didn't know who they really were. I didn't realize what I was getting into." I was in shock. "Maria, what the hell are you saying? You've been working with criminals? You..." I stopped myself, feeling my throat tighten with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask for help?" Her face twisted with frustration. I couldn't. I didn't have a choice. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it on my own, but now they're coming after me. They know I have money, and they're not going to let me out of this. I can't get out. My mind was reeling. This wasn't just about money. This was bigger. So you've been using me to finance some kind of illegal business, and now you're in over your head? I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but there was something else too, fear. Fear for Maria. Fear for what she had gotten herself into. I didn't want it to get like this. I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep it separate from the boutique, from everything we built. But I was wrong. Her voice cracked, and I could see the strain in her face. I stared at her, the betrayal hitting me hard, but it wasn't the time for that. What do we do now, Maria? You can't do this alone. You need to tell the police, get help. We can do. She shook her head, cutting me off. It's too late for that. If I go to the police, they'll come for me first. I can't. No one can help me now. The weight of her words settled in. She was right. She had crossed a line that no one could easily erase. I had no idea how deep this went, but I knew one thing for sure. Maria wasn't the person I thought she was. She was trapped, and so was I now. Everything after Maria's confession happened so quickly, it felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I was trying to process what she'd told me, trying to figure out where we went from here, but the reality of her situation started to settle in. This wasn't just a messy business deal gone wrong. This was dangerous. This was something that, once it had its claws in you, didn't let go. Maria was right. The people she'd gotten involved with weren't the type to just let her walk away. It was too late for anything simple, for easy fixes. I realized that this wasn't just about helping her anymore. This was a fight for survival. Maria looked at me, waiting for me to say something, to make a decision. I didn't know what the right move was. My mind was racing, bouncing between anger, confusion, and a sick sense of dread. So what now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a rhetorical question. I wanted answers, but I knew deep down that she had no answers either. I don't know, she said, her voice barely audible. I've tried everything. I've tried paying them off, tried giving them what they wanted, but it's never enough. They're not going to stop until they get what they want, and I don't even know what that is anymore. I'm trapped. Her eyes were wide with fear, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something I wasn't used to seeing: vulnerability. She wasn't the confident, self-assured Maria I had known. She was broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. I stood there, my mind running through every possibility, every option. There has to be something we can do. We can go to the police. I know it's risky, but if we tell them everything, maybe we can. No, she shouted, cutting me off. Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought she might collapse. You don't understand. They'll kill me if I go to the police. You don't know who these people are. They don't play by the rules. There's no way out. Her words hung in the air, and the weight of them crashed down on me. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to do anything to make this better, but all I could do was stand there, helpless. I couldn't let her go through this alone, but I couldn't see any way to get her out of it either. I didn't know the people she was talking about. I didn't know the full extent of what she had gotten herself into, but I had to try something. I couldn't just walk away. I'm not leaving you, I said finally, my voice firm despite the fear that gripped my chest. You're not in this alone. We'll figure something out. Don't make promises you can't keep, Maria interrupted, shaking her head. I don't want you involved. This is my mess, and I don't want you to get dragged down with me. Please, just leave it alone. For your own sake. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her expression was hard, like she was trying to push me away, trying to protect me from whatever hell she had fallen into. But I couldn't. I couldn't just leave her to deal with this on her own. Not after everything we'd been through. I had put my trust in her, and now she needed me, whether she wanted to admit it or not. I'm not going anywhere, I said again, more resolutely this time. We're in this together, and we'll get through it together. She looked at me like I was crazy, like I was a fool, but I saw the flicker of something else in her eyes, maybe relief, maybe gratitude. It was fleeting, but it was there. You don't get it, she said softly, almost pleading. You don't know what they're capable of. They'll hurt you if they find out you're helping me. It's not just me they're after. It's everyone close to me. If they know you're involved, they'll... I stepped closer to her, cutting her off. Then we'll deal with it. We'll take precautions. I stopped myself, realizing I had no idea how to deal with any of this. I didn't know who these people were. I didn't know what kind of danger we were really in. But I couldn't let her face this on her own. We don't have a choice, Maria. I said quietly, trying to meet her gaze. I'm not letting you face this alone. We'll figure out a plan. I'll help you, no matter what it takes. She stared at me for a long time, like she was trying to read me, trying to figure out if I was just talking or if I meant it. And then, finally, she nodded. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't know how to get out of this. We'll figure it out, I said again, trying to reassure her, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. We'll make a plan. We just need to think this through. That night, we spent hours talking, trying to figure out what to do next. The more Maria explained, the more I realized just how deep she had gotten into this mess. She had borrowed money from the wrong people. The business deal that had seemed so innocent had spiraled into something dangerous. She had crossed paths with people who didn't care about the law or morality. They only cared about their money and power. And now, Maria was caught in their web. By the time the sun began to rise, we had come up with a plan, an imperfect one, but the only one we could think of. We would leave town, disappear for a while. Maria would use the money she had left to pay off some of her debts, and we'd get as far away from these people as possible. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the only one that didn't end in one of us being dragged into something worse. We packed our things in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I didn't know if this was going to work, if running was even an option anymore. But I did know one thing: I wasn't leaving her behind. Not now, not ever. The car was packed, the door was locked, and we were ready to leave when Maria's phone rang. I saw her glance at the screen, her face going pale as she answered. The voice on the other end was low, threatening. She didn't speak at first, just listened, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she finally hung up, she turned to me, her face drained of color. They know, she whispered. They know we're leaving. I felt my heart stop in my chest. What do we do now? I asked, barely able to breathe. Maria looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and regret. We didn't have much time. The moment Maria hung up the phone, I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that we were running out of options. The plan to leave, to disappear into the night, had just been ripped away by a phone call that was only the beginning of something far worse. They knew. They knew we were trying to escape, and I could almost feel the eyes of whoever was on the other end of that call on me, even though we were still in the safety of her apartment. I glanced around the room, as if some hidden escape route would suddenly present itself. But nothing changed. The room stayed the same, the silence between us growing heavier by the second. We need to go. Now, Maria said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and urgency. She grabbed a small duffel bag from the corner of the room, shoving a few belongings into it. I did the same, but my mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. The people who had threatened her, whoever they were already steps ahead of us. They were tracking us. They knew exactly where we were and what we were planning. I had no idea how they had found out, but it didn't matter. We didn't have the luxury of figuring that out. We had to move. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I helped her pack, knowing that each minute we wasted made us more vulnerable. Maria had already started the car, and I could hear the engine humming outside, waiting for us to leave. But as we approached the door, she froze. "Wait," she said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. I looked at her, confused. "What's wrong?" "They're already here," she said, her face draining of all color. "They're outside." I didn't need to ask who she meant. There was no need. I could feel it in my gut, the weight of the situation pressing down harder than ever. They were closing in, and we didn't have a chance to outrun them, not without knowing where we were going, not without a plan. I could already hear the faint sound of car engines outside, their presence unmistakable. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the door. We need to stay quiet. Stay calm. I knew that if we didn't think clearly now, if we didn't stay focused, it would all fall apart. I could feel the adrenaline taking over, my instincts kicking in, but even that couldn't stop the sheer panic that was growing inside of me. I had no idea how we were going to get out of this. No idea how we could fight back against people who were already one step ahead of us. Maria's eyes locked onto mine. She was breathing heavily, but she nodded. I could see the fear in her face, but also a resolve that hadn't been there before. She had changed so much in the past few weeks, and I had seen that same fear before, but now it was mixed with something else, something sharper. She wasn't going to let them win, not without a fight. We stood there for what felt like hours, our backs pressed against the wall, trying to control our breathing, listening for any sound that could signal someone moving in. The air in the room was thick with tension, and every creak of the floorboards, every distant noise from the street made me jump. I could feel my mind racing, trying to figure out the best course of action, but the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't have a plan, and I had no way of knowing what our next move should be. Maria grabbed my arm, pulling me closer. "We have to leave now," she said, her voice low and urgent. "If we stay here, they'll find us. If we run, we might still have a chance." I didn't argue. I knew she was right. We didn't have time to think, not anymore. I followed her to the back door, both of us moving quietly, trying not to make a sound. As we stepped outside, the night air hit me like a cold slap. It was dark, but the street lights flickered in the distance, and I could hear the sound of footsteps moving closer. We had to move fast, and we had to be careful. We couldn't let them know we were leaving the apartment. We crept along the edge of the building, trying to stay out of sight. The tension between us was palpable, and even though I knew Maria was just as scared as I was, she wasn't showing it. She was focused, determined, and that's when I realized something. She wasn't just trying to get away from these people. She was fighting back. This wasn't just about running anymore. It was about survival. We rounded the corner of the building and made our way to the car. I was already scanning the street, trying to figure out which direction we should take. Should we go to the highway, get lost in the crowd? Should we drive somewhere remote and hope no one would find us? Every option felt risky, but there was no choice. We had to leave now. Maria got in the car first, starting the engine, her hands shaking as she gripped the wheel. I didn't know where she was going, but I didn't care. We were getting out of here, and that was all that mattered. The sound of the car's tires scraping against the asphalt was loud in the otherwise quiet night, but it was a sound I was grateful to hear. We were leaving, and for a brief moment, it felt like we had control again. But as we turned the corner and I saw the headlights of a car coming toward us, my heart dropped into my stomach. They were following us. They knew we had left, and they were right behind us. "They're here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Maria's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and her grip on the wheel tightened. "I know," she said, her voice steady despite the panic that I could feel coming from her. "Hold on." The car behind us began to gain speed, closing the distance between us. I could see the silhouette of the vehicle getting closer, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. They were going to catch us. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew one thing for sure: they weren't going to let us go without a fight. Maria hit the gas, pushing the car faster. We swerved through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic, doing everything we could to shake them off. But the car behind us kept coming, and I could see the headlights growing brighter, closer. I turned to Maria, my voice shaking. "What do we do now?" She didn't answer at first. She just gritted her teeth, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We keep driving," she said, her voice fierce. "We don't stop. Not until we're safe." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that we had a chance. But the car was getting closer, and we were running out of time.